So, like I mentioned, you finished your AD at NEC recently. But while you were at NEC, you were able to play. You got to play Shostakovich's second cello concerto with the school
Yeah,
orchestra. And I remember, I think a few days ago, I was at the gym listening to it, and it was a phenomenal recording on YouTube.
thank you.
Um, can you share a little bit about your relationship with this work and how it's unique from the more popular first concerto? Because I think until recently it hasn't really been as played, but I'm seeing it more. Uh, I'm seeing more people perform it, especially for competitions now. And
Yeah,
so there's definitely a rise in growth and interest. So can you talk a little bit about your relationship with this piece?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I I really connected with that piece very on a very powerful level when even the first time I heard it. And I don't want to say better or worse, but it's for sure much more unique kind of
Mm,
Shostakovich than the first one is. The first one is so clearly kind of this military Shostakovich kind of on the edge passionate character. I feel like the second one is so weird and dreamy and kind of like being in a really dark place or like stuck in a swamp and searching for light of some kind and um extremely beautiful and I mean I really was for that concert you're talking about I was going kind of insane towards the end towards the concert because I mean that piece was kind of everything in my life the 2 weeks before playing it with NEC and I mean it is for sure really dark I mean an
mm,
incredibly dark piece
yeah,
and
yeah.
so it's like then I started like because I was studying the score so much and was
Mm,
really knowing every impulse and it's a little bit more complicated and weird than the first one and also for the orchestra because they have really long notes for a long time and then it'll change like at an unexpected moment to something
mm.
else and like the pizzicatos for the orchestra never comes in quite when you expect it and at the same time it's really slow at the same
Mhm,
time and it's kind of slowly progressing so
mm,
if you're not concentrated it's just it's really easy to that it doesn't really you don't really understand it I think if
mm,
you're as sitting in the orchestra or kind of like it's a piece one needs to know I feel like and it's a piece that's worth spending so much time studying on because there's so much interesting stuff about it. Like the fact
mm,
that the whole thing, in a way, is just one big circle. He writes the whole tempo as 100,
mm.
which is sort of impossible to do because it means that the first movement is super fast, uh,
Right.
and it means that the third movement is quite slow some places. But I think it's more the idea of the whole piece being kind of one being
Mm,
that is behind that tempo marking than the fact that you have to play it in 100 constantly. I
mm,
think that is less the point than the kind of completion of the work.
right.
And yeah, there is. I think in a way this piece is harder to instantly love than the first one, but
Yeah.
when and if you get it, I think it's a deeper feeling and um almost philosophical in a way. And I was actually up to as a little funny side story, but because I was kind of losing it because I was the only thing was studying was that piece for many hours every day
Oh,
up to
wow.
the concert. And I started like okay I gotta like decompress somehow so I started watching Monty Python in my free time. Uh, which is like yeah if listeners don't know it's like one of the most silly comedy British comedy satire shows kind of but it kind of worked because they are really making fun of society on so many levels
Yeah.
in Monty Python. And like Shostakovich at this point, he's like totally turned his back on society. He has no
Mm,
trust in really anything anymore,
mm.
I think.
Yeah.
At this point of his life, it was at the end of his life that he wrote the
Right.
concerto as well.
Right.
And then actually it started getting feeling even crazier to play this music because you start finding things that are actually sort of funny
Mm,
and humorous at times, and in a way that makes it a little bit even more kind of freaky because there comes
yeah.
this kind of element of humor on top of this kind of horrifying stuff. But it's an amazing work, and it reminds me a bit of, I don't know if anyone's watched it. It reminds me a bit of the movie Eraserhead by David Lynch,
Okay.
which is equally dark and weird and kind of grimy.
Yeah.
Um, but there's yeah, it's one of the pieces, and I'm really happy that it's going coming more out there now.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah. Well, and you're right, because I think people, it's easy to be attracted to the first concerto because it's like very clear and it's very like you can understand very clearly from the beginning, really, like what it's about, right? Like
Yeah,
you were saying, it was very militant. But the second, it starts slow and it ends slow, so that it's kind of like the Tchaik Six, like Pathétique, or
yeah,
other works that have that, but. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think musically speaking, and I've never played the piece, but having listened to it, it's in a way more interesting than the first because there's more layers to it, I believe. And
yeah.
it really, even in the first movement, it takes time for it to kind of boil, but it really
Mhm.
does. So yeah,
Yeah, truly. Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and there's so long lines. It's so
yeah,
hard. It's really hard because it's sort
yeah,
of like slowly rising, and
right,
you need like a lot of patience, and it's really challenging
yeah,
uh to pull it off convincingly. But I mean, we can
yeah,
just keep trying because it's really worth trying anyway. I mean,
yeah.
um, yeah.
Well, you kind of shared a little bit about how you were practicing and preparing for that concert. Can you talk a little bit about the process for you, not just with that piece, but just in general, like how you go about practicing and like how do you balance, focusing on the technical side while also trying to think about the musical aspect of every piece?
Yeah. Well, I think I'm way less kind of cutting board between the different sides of a piece when I'm practicing it. It's sort of a mishmash of all of it in a way. Like so
Mm,
when I'm practicing, I love practicing slow and
mm,
really meditating with a piece. I also generally I sit with the entire score, and I also try to play like the piano part or the orchestra part just to understand the harmony on the cello actually,
mm. Yeah, yeah.
while I'm also learning the other parts. And I really love practicing slowly and kind of meditating over all of the harmonies and the melodies and where it's going or where it's coming from. And I feel very creative doing that, and I also feel like time, like Einstein was right in the sense of time being relative,
Mm,
because um, when I really zone into this sort of meditation aspect, and I feel like my subconscious and my consciousness of what I want to do with the piece come together, and I feel like it's possible to play the piece how I want in that
mm,
slow tempo
mm,
without having to overthink it.
mm,
I'm very much a kind of a intuition feeling type
mm,
person,
mm,
and I really like to investigate and hear all of the harmonies and feel all of the harmonies and like slowly let it grow, you know?
Yeah.
Sometimes I like to be I mean, if it's a really technical passage of
Hmm.
something, I I treat it a bit less like that. I
Hmm.
start to treat it more like athletics or like a sports fan or something like
Yeah.
this. Like very much using I like using metronome for really for technical passages
Yeah.
and starting extremely slow and very patiently putting it up. You know,
Yeah.
three beats or whatever you call it per
Yeah.
time I take it,
Right.
or even less sometimes. And like, there's a passage at the end. You can also find this on YouTube, but the Khachaturian Concerto Rhapsody that I played some years
Mm-hmm.
ago, where the last 4 minutes is just basically like an Armenian circus music, and really difficult and technical stuff that
Yeah.
like, you know, then the one day I could get it almost in tempo, and then the next day it was totally gone, so I had to start all over, you know,
Yeah.
and you just sort of keep doing that. But then
Yeah.
at the end, actually, it did become relative again at the when I reached like the point of the concert, because I remember
Mm-hmm.
playing that at the concert, and it was just so satisfying to feel actually to feel calm in the body and kind of feel
Mm.
the same way that I had been doing when I had been practicing it extremely slowly, if not
Right.
better. And that made the whole thing feel like one, and that made those like, you know, 1,000 notes fit into that one gesture that they actually are
Yeah.
all a part of. And like
Right.
to realize that the picture is greater than one thinks at the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just a really satisfying thing at the end of the
Yeah.
day, actually.
Yeah.
And it opens the mind, and I think it's good for intelligence as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and brain chemistry and whatever.
Right.
I think that's true as well. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, and I really appreciate that you shared that you have the score with you because especially as a younger student, it's easy for us to just want to focus on our part, but in
Mhm.
reality, we're just like you said, one piece of that bigger picture. So
Yeah.
even in concertos, it's like, okay, yeah, you might be the soloist, but like the orchestra is just as important, if not more important in many places. So
And it's still
yeah,
chamber music. I mean, it's
yeah,
forever chamber music. Like, I mean, sometimes I mean, even like in the Dvorak concerto at the minor melody of the first movement, you have a duet
yeah,
with the flute, and even though
yeah,
you can't even see the flute, you still have to like spiritually connect with the flute, and
yeah,
like, you know, I think there's so much of this everywhere, and I
mm,
think everyone in life really wants to connect at the end of the day, and in a way
yeah,
the idea of like ambition or reaching the top or all of this is sort of toxic and kind of ruins the point of
yeah,
music in my opinion very often, because
yeah.
even when you're a soloist, my favorite concerto concerts that I heard was when I really felt that they were connected to each other,
Right.
between the parts and so on. And it wasn't like that guy and then those people over there. And
Right. Yeah.
I didn't. I don't know how to explain quite what I mean, but I
Yeah.
like we were talking about with every single body being different, and
Right.
I think that is something that should be embraced more in the
Mm.
world, because I feel like the individual the I feel like if I may go a bit far, I feel like the level
Mm.
is going up in general, in the
Yeah.
sense of the quantity of people who can play, but at the
Yeah.
same time, I feel like the voices are getting smaller
Ah, yeah.
somehow, and that's what I think is I think that the world kind of needs
Mm.
voices at
Yeah. Yeah.
the end of
Yeah.
the day, and like if people are playing because their teacher told them to, that's not a great reason. I mean, and then you can kind of feel sorry for them because the teacher in a way
Mm.
is repressing them. to
Yeah. Yeah.
to do that because you don't have any other choice. That's the only if you want to do this, you have to, and like the idea of pressure in that sense, and like I would prefer passion or vigorousness or something like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
to pressure, honestly. And I think it's so important to try to spread this kind of vibe in the musical society because
Yeah.
everyone is really doing their best,
Mm.
and I don't I think everyone is doing almost like so much their best that they forget what they really want sometimes. I
Yeah.
definitely do. And yeah, so that's I don't know why I came over to that, but I've just been thinking
Mm.
so much about this with voice. I recently heard an album by Charles Mingus actually
Mm.
with his big band called the Black Saint and the Sinner Lady, an
Mm.
album from the beginning of the 60s, where it was like I never heard a voice that was just so clear and so grimy and dirty and like angry in many
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah.
But it was just such a voice. You could just
Yeah.
hear like that was Charles Mingus. No one else could do that. And I think anyone can do actually do that
Yeah.
if they
Yeah.
really trust their body and really trust what they are looking for. So
Yeah.
I think a mixture of trust and searching is essential somehow.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
to enjoy
yeah.
it.
Mhm.
Yeah, just to enjoy
Yeah.
it. And I think it's the
Yeah.
most important thing is to enjoy it. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
And I think it's really, I really agree with what you were saying about, in a way, the level of playing has gone up so high, but like the level, not level, sorry, like the voice or the curiosity is not the same level. And I think a lot of that has to do with just the advent of recordings and having everything at your disposal. And so now it's like you almost don't have to be creative because you can just listen and find whatever you want. And again, I think listening to as many recordings is great. But
yeah,
at the same time, yeah, I mean, but at the same time, like what you were saying with the score, like looking at the score can help you like decide fingering sometimes, and understanding the harmony, understanding the color of that particular passage might encourage you to go, let's say, up the D string as opposed to staying on in first position or something along those lines, right?
yeah.
So it's I think you're spot on. It's so important to keep searching and keep being creative and not just being content with the quota, I guess, the status quo, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and also like just yeah, I think finding ways of non-judgmentalness and body
Mm,
mindfulness
mm,
practice is really is good as well. Just to really I've been so fascinated. I had a few lessons with Don Weilerstein as well when I was at
oh.
NEC. And
Mm.
I loved his way, and I also had a few lessons with Kim for that matter, Kim
Okay.
Kashkashian,
Yeah,
who
yeah,
I also was a big fan of because they both have in extremely different ways, but they really have this kind of body mindfulness and like sound and warmth and kind of feeling the music in the entire body somehow
mm,
philosophy which I think is so good to have and again it's like I love sitting with the score so that I can imagine and feel all of the harmonies but yeah there's a tendency to play with one's eyes and
yeah,
rather than with the heart and it's that one needs to go. I have a really big ambition of being a teacher as well
yeah,
because yeah because I think it's a important thing and I feel like it does get mistreated at times
mm.
so whatever one can do to help that. I think is good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.